you know, you're all very busy people and very important jobs to do. And I think to take an hour out to do this is very good. But I think we need to keep to our timelines in order to be responsible for you. So I think we should start the process. It's being recorded. Just to let you know, and anybody who's just locked in, that I had a call about 5 minutes ago from Stephen Lunn, who's on the panel in Tasmania. He's just been evacuated from his restaurant or somewhere anyway, wherever he was, ready for the logging on, and so he's had to go out. And he said he'll get back in as soon as he can. My immediate strategy is we'll continue on, and if he doesn't join us, what I'll do is I'll interview him and get his opinion, his comments, and then I'll tack it onto the video before we put it on there, so that we'll still have the 4 comments. And then when I let you know the recordings have been released, we'll be able to watch, you know, the comments, and I'll put it maybe at the beginning or at the end, so that, you know, it's easily accessible. Okay. Today, we're again very, very lucky to have 4 good speakers, in the sense that Sarah Maric, say hi, wave your hand, Sarah, from Copperfield College. Sarah's got a huge amount of experience both in the industry and then finally in education, and particularly in the vet system. And I thought it would be an interesting aspect to have a look at 4 different sectors. Because I think maybe the curriculum might be the same, but there will maybe differences there for everyone to learn something from. Rai, if you wave your hand, Rai is from hello. Rai Cunningham. Rai, R-head. What does R-head mean?
Relieving head teacher.
Relieving.
Relieving head teacher. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Relieving head from TAFE, New South Wales. So that's good. Giving a sort of a New South Wales flavour and a TAFE flavour to his comments. Keith is from a private provider. Keith, say hi. And
hi everybody, how are we going?
Thanks so much for dropping in like this. I don't like, you know, necessarily just asking people at the last minute, but as you can appreciate, I was into that situation. Unfortunately, Robert Ford has had to apologise. He's had 3 members of staff go down, and actually all with significantly with stress duties. So that's quite incredible. Stephen is here. Stephen is with us. Good. And then I'm just about to introduce Stephen. So I'll say hi to Stephen. You are 10 seconds in time.
Excellent. Good afternoon.
How was the fire alarm?
It was that was the second one for the day. So it's been a crazy day.
Why should you be any different? Anyway, we've just started, Stephen. We've started the process, and I've introduced Sarah, Rai, Keith, and now yourself. Who are the panel. As you know, we asked the panel to speak for between 3 and 8 minutes to give their take on the question, which this particular session is: how could the pandemic reshape the delivery of culinary education and other services? We're asking the 4 to give their take on the question, just as stimuli propositions. You know, we've got 4 different sectors giving their opinion, but the question is, you know, does this lockdown, does this crisis teach us that virtual learning can actually replace a good deal of the old traditional face-to-face classroom learning? And as you know, if you look at workplace assessment, made a huge change to the vision of the industry. Maybe this is another step in that direction. Does it also, in my mind, does it also imply that, you know, virtual training may be much cheaper because it's easier to get to? It saves parking, it saves costing, it saves, it might even save delivery costs if you've got one lecturer doing a class of maybe 100, 150 people rather than just 18 or 20. That also, I suppose, begs the question is, what other extra resources do teachers need? Do they need anything? And it's up to you guys and girls to to say that so that people can listen to that, and particularly, as you know, that the recordings are far more popular than just the session itself. So a lot of people will hear your views on that. Will the consulting process, now we have a very stable process with the Industry Reference Committee in the way they gather information. They go out and ask a lot of people their opinions, they get emails back, they collect the information and try and put it all together. But, you know, this presents, I think, another opportunity that may need to be thought about. Can we have it through regular online meetings of associations and chefs and teachers and all that sort of stuff? And also the other way around. I know this is a tough question to some extent, but I have a vision that maybe the IRC could look at one or two Zoom meetings of them at action, so that at least people will understand the processes and see what goes on. But I think those are the sort of things that we could propose or find out that it's not possible. You know, how will transport be affected? You know, you say to yourself, why transport? Now, the whole crisis is going to stop a lot of students from going to school, maybe by public transport, which means they're going to have parking spaces. Sorry, leave that alone. You know, will that have an effect on the number of students that will turn up? And, you know, what opportunities? For every crisis in my book, there's always an equal and opposite reaction. There's always opportunities. So what are the opportunities that, you know, you can think of that other people can say, hey, you know, we might like to learn from that? Because of every session so far, there's been some incredible opportunities that have been identified by people, and people have gone away and said, never thought of that. So I'll ask the order of presentation. I'm asking Sarah, because I always believe in ladies first, being an old-fashioned, one of the old-fashioned crowd, followed by Roy, followed by Keith, and then finally Stephen to give their take on the question. And I hand over to you, Sarah, to give your take on the question through your vision and your eyes. Thank you.
My eyes. Well, I'm coming from the vet sector, so certificate 1 level. So looking back across the school system, right from primary up, the challenges we faced were that about 30 to 50% stayed the same or improved, and between 50 and 70% showed some level of decline in student performance. Motivations or impacts behind that were the fact that there might have been multiple members within the household trying to get access to ICT, internet access, Wi-Fi issues. You might have had parents trying to work at home, as well as students trying to achieve online work as well, therefore impacting on broadband levels, speed, all of those kind of things. Some students didn't have access to computers at all. We had about 30% of students who had no access to computers whatsoever. And then what the school did was they issued somewhere in the region of $250,000 worth of computers to the students that didn't have access to computers across the school. We have a multi-campus school, so we have 3 campuses in the region of 3,000 students across the whole sector with teachers included. So student body, teaching body of 3,000 people totally. From the teacher's perspective, the junior campuses found it quite dramatic, the shift. They've gone from a very classroom-focused classroom with 25 students to suddenly trying to manage 25, 26 students at home. Some of those students were doing all sorts of random things like turning up in the wrong classroom, passwords were being issued, there was, you know, incidents of naughty behaviour in various different classrooms. From my perspective, I had online lessons at Year 11 and Year 12. I didn't have any issues with classroom behaviour. They were all very mature, they listened, they participated. We had sections at the beginning of each class where I explained the lessons work. I went through an outline of what was going to be taught that lesson. I went through the content, and then at the end of the lesson, I did a review of the content that was taught in the lessons. And the students were given time to work independently. Of the students in my classes, about 60% did very well, and about 40% slipped back. The students that slipped in their work performance were generally students that would require more support in the classroom. So these are students that may have a level of dyslexia, they may have reading difficulty, they might need just encouragement and emotional support, or they might have some underlying family issue, or some background of needing emotional support on some level. So it was quite varied. As for the classroom work at the moment, my Year 12 class are on track, on target. We've caught up with everything. Their online work is where I would expect it to be. I've been back at school doing practical work since the 19th of May, and we're on track with all of that for the Year 12s. The Year 11s, half the class is on task and exactly where they should be, and about 50% of the class I still need to work to catch them up because of the COVID situation. So that's where I am as far as practically the impact. Where I see the changes occurring from the vet end of things is that definitely electronic medium has a place. The couple of concerns that I have are that students may not be learning in the kind of depth which they would have learned when the teacher was directing the class one-on-one through every single component of the lesson and going through each little individual section and going into depth about the nuances of various bits of equipment, or putting it into context and talking about in a real life situation. You don't always get that kind of depth when you're working through the computer medium. What they tend to do is they go back to the book, they're looking for the specific section of what it is they want, and they don't go necessarily through the entire text. They skim read rather than actually work their way through the text the way you would have if you had the book and the student in the classroom. So that's one impact I see of the online process, not creating enough depth in learning. The other concern for me is with the level of students that I have with dyslexia or some kind of learning difficulty. They do need the one-on-one support, and I don't think we can ever take that away from a student. The only way that you could replace that would be with some form of in-depth online video system where you could do this kind of medium with WebEx and a one-on-one chat with a student in a separate room, so they could be working online and then they could access the teacher one-on-one via WebEx or Zoom and ask them specific questions to support them. But I can't see that we could ever go to fully online. And then, as you're all aware, we're a very practical subject. So regardless of the fact that we may wish to go online, there will never be a way that we can teach the practical skills and see the practical skills one-on-one unless we're there with the student. So that's how it looks from my perspective. I'll hand to the next person. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Sarah. That's well put too. So good. All right, now we'll get a different view, or hopefully same sort of nuances. But Rai, we're going to hand over to you now to give your take on the question, and what do you think is the future and how it's handled in New South Wales?
Yeah, look, I was a part of a team in the Western Sydney region to set up commercial cookery for what we call connected delivery. So we're very fortunate that all TAFE New South Wales students have access to Microsoft Teams, but it wasn't really utilised. So our initial reaction was, faced with the COVID issue, was to get everyone on the same page. So getting students and teachers to start using all the same platform. So in essence, it's sort of Zoom meets Office 365 sort of smashed together with elements of LMSs in there as well. So we're very fortunate were able to have all our students clicked into that very quickly. So our initial reaction, I think, was to get as many students on it as possible. So we created classroom teams via Microsoft Teams. And we were able to pretty much get, I think the last count was over 250 commercial cookery students on Microsoft Teams within a week and a half. So that was a really big challenge. You know, obviously what Sarah said in regards to people having technical issues, not having computers at home. You know, worst case scenario, we sent them to the library for one-on-one support to set up that account and get their head around how it operates. But once they were set up, they could pretty much watch it on any device, whether it was a phone, laptop, you know, iPad, whatever. So that was great. On the teacher side, obviously we're, you know, dealing with a brand new software, brand new challenges, and you know, to be honest, and I'm sure Sarah will have this opinion, some teachers jumped onto it and was like, this is the greatest thing ever, and some teachers wanted to just jump off, to be purely honest. So we put together two strategies. There was 5 hours compulsory training that every teacher did, and then there was additional hours after that, up to about 10 hours of Teams training. So we're Teams training on Teams, but anyway, it tended to work well. But also what we did is we created a buddy system. So, you know, the people that we knew were quite strong in that space, we paired up with people who were challenging. Now, moving on from that teacher perspective of being really challenged to, you know, like, I don't want to do this, I'm out of my comfort zone, that type of scenario, it's completely changed. Our region and our teachers across the region have completely changed mindset, and they're very supportive, they're very willing to share. The dynamics completely changed within our group, and we've done a couple of other activities with teachers, and it's gone from like, why are you asking me this question, to how can I help you? And teachers jumping in and supporting each other on online classes. So another step that we took was video content, and I think Sarah made mention of video content. If you wanted to take practical further, you would need to definitely bring in some type of video content. Video content's great. Video content can be done quite easily, but the challenge with video content is cleaning it up and actually editing it and making it a polished product. Some teachers love getting in front of the camera, some teachers don't. What I'll do is I'll actually share a link a little bit later on one of our completed videos if you wanted to have a look at what we've actually done. So really trying to, we were very fortunate to have a student within the region who worked with SBS Food for 30 years. So very, very fortunate that he was able to provide some advice on how to shoot engaging video content, as opposed to, you know, just a camera facing down or something like that. So it was really important for us to skills and feedback on board. I don't want to burn too much of your time. The only thing I was thinking about the future and where we take it from here. I suppose with Microsoft Teams and the students, Sarah was throwing around her numbers and in regards to how many students were up to date and stuff like that. We've been utilising the analytics behind Microsoft Teams, so we can actually see when the students are logging on, are they participating, and it actually flags a student who's not participating. So, you know, I think this is what Sarah mentioned. I think this is when we send in the cavalry in regards to sending in support services or sending in a educational support wing to go, oh, are you having problems? What's going on? Why haven't you accessed? Do you need more technical support or something along those lines? So, yeah, it's sort of, I would say 5 years ago, I was a massive fan of Moodle, LMSs, that type of thing. But sort of Teams brings it all together, and it's one platform where it all sort of sits together as such. So basically the Word document sits on a site and they fill it out, and it's all live, cloud-based. So it's pretty amazing to see how the students have reacted to that. So much so, I've actually set this up in China as well. We have over 40 students in China using that same thing, and they've figured it out and applying it. And I get the messages on my phone when they're in their meeting and all engaging. So yeah, I think there's definitely a future, but it needs to in regards to connected delivery for commercial cookery, but it requires strong video content. And it requires a good platform to actually work off for the knowledge-based assessments. Any other questions?
No, that's terrific. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Good points. Particularly got a couple of questions to ask you myself after. Keith,
Yep.
from a point of view of, I think, workplace assessment, you're pretty much an expert in that area, particularly, and known for it. And that's another way of looking at this whole crisis and the issues that are surrounded. Maybe you'd like to explain from that point of view as well as your private provider's vision. Thank you.
Yes, certainly, George. Thank you. And hi, everybody. Yes, I work for a small company, AVTES, here in Victoria. We have a contract to train apprentices and trainees here in Victoria only. We have SBAT apprentices still at school, and we cover the whole of Victoria. Unlike the TAFE, obviously, we travel to visit our students. So in general, our contact with students is one-on-one. Very rarely do you go to a venue or a place where there's two students at the same level. Unlike TAFE, of course, students can start anytime they want, any day of the year. So every student is in a completely different, at a different point along the path. So we visit our students. We try and visit each one every month. So our contact with them, our one-on-one contact, is really, really important. Also, I think just as important, of course, is our contact with their employer and also with their head chef. We get feedback regarding the student. We get feedback regarding the business that they're working in, how successful it is, how well it's going, any issues that may come up within the business, all of which, of course, affect the student. And we even get to the point of taking part in progress within the business. So, for example, not long ago, I had a company, a brewery in northeastern Victoria that was looking at buying new deep fryers. So we were able to utilize the students and put them through a process of doing some research, some costing on different types of fryers. And as a result, the company, instead of just buying 4 normal fryers for $10,000 or whatever, ended up spending $32,000 on beautiful fryers that used 40% less oil, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a great way to train the students. It really is hands-on training, and the students get to see success within that effort that they've been putting in there. Of course, COVID comes along. Now, I don't believe COVID is actually going to change anything whatsoever. I do think that the way we're training and the way that training is taking place in Australia in general is changing. What COVID has done has forced us all to move a lot quicker. We as a small company, we're a small family company. We've been doing a workplace training for 20 years. And we have a really good formula, the way we do it. We have, sort of excellent procedures in place, et cetera, et cetera. And along comes COVID, and all of a sudden, we're not allowed to go and visit our students. So we've been talking about introducing electronic enrollments, some electronic training, probably for 2 years. But we really had done nothing about it. We talked about it, but nothing happened. Fortunately, we've got the 2 owners of the company, Chris and Louise, jumped straight into action, and within 2 weeks, we've got an electronic system up and running. We can do enrollments online. We can do our Zoom meetings, et cetera, et cetera. We can have even have logbooks authenticated by the chef via email, et cetera, et cetera. So we created a whole new system of doing it. The other thing that happened was because of the contact that we have with our students and ex-students, obviously we get to know them very, very well. We had a huge number of applications for Certificate 4s. Chefs that had done their Cert 3 or their apprenticeship, as I say, most of ours are apprenticeships, finished, a couple of years ago or even last year, a few years past, decided they now had the time to do their Cert 4. We promoted this. We were trying to get as many of these to do, and it was very successful. I think we had about 100 of our students interested in going up to a Cert 4, which was quite a considerable number for that short period of time. So that went well, and I think that is important in progressing students along through the Cert 4 and then onto diploma. So that's been a benefit, and hopefully it has made students more aware of the availability of Certificate 4 and of course of diplomas. As I say, we go out and visit all of our students. So we also have an advantage that we train each student probably slightly differently. We are currently at the moment talking about developing streams within Cert 3. We do this already. We have people that work in cafes, people that work in 5-star hotels, people that work in fine-end restaurants, people that work in pubs, etc., etc. Their training needs to be slightly different. So it needs to be one-on-one. And one-on-one, of course, has been very, very simple using Zoom. However, what we're tending to find is that many students still prefer to contact us in the old-fashioned way via text, email, or just a phone call. We've left ourselves open for calls anytime. We've found that, well, of all of our students, I have approximately 70 students, and of those 70, only one of them has not been working. So they've all been working, be it fewer hours, but they've all continued working. So they've been calling and getting in contact at various hours and times of the day. So that's been an advantage, the fact that they can work and progress within their scope. The other advantage of workplace training, or another one of the advantages, is that it's flexibility. We had many students that were going through the course and had got up to the really practical units, those of poultry, seafood, etc., etc. And of course, we were able to sort of say, hey, hang on, we'll put a hold on this. Let's go on to something that's a little bit more theoretical, whether that be, training or costing, whatever it might be. Let's go off the practical onto the theoretical. We'll do those, and hopefully by the time we're all back at work, we'll be able to go back onto the more practical units. I had an SBAT who wasn't allowed to go into the schools, but he was helping the teacher in school teach some of the kids there. So we started doing Coach Others, so that he could actually do that whilst he was still doing that within the school environment. So the flexibility that we have in workplace training is so much greater. But unfortunately, it's very difficult to do that via Zoom. It is very much a personal contact method of training. We know the personal goals of each individual student. We know their employer really well, and we know their head chef and what their head chef tries to do. We take a great deal of effort in working alongside the head chef so that they're able to complete units very simply. I think one of the difficulties that I think most people have had in this time is where there's units that have logbooks. Makes it almost impossible to complete. Although again, on the side, I think it's very hard for TAFE training now to complete these logbooks when they're supposed to do 6 of each dish or whatever, whereas in workplace training, it's very simple. Even if you just put something on as a special, 6 of them, they'll do in no time. So even I think the way that the package is presented nowadays makes it harder, in fact, to do some of these practical units, even in a TAFE environment. The workplace environment to me just seems, so much easier to do it, because repetition can be done so much easier. I think the other thing that is different between that we have a difference is that, of course, we don't have overseas students. All of our students must be Australian citizens or have permanent residency. So we don't have the difficulty with overseas students. The only issue that arises with us with overseas students, I suppose, is, especially here in the city, is the numbers of them trying to get part-time work or work to get their work experience, and how do we get around this issue? Because it is a problem within the city, where we have thousands of overseas students all wanting to do X number of months of practical experience. So what should we do? Should we create a separate course for overseas students, which may not involve this this amount of experience? I don't know. It's an issue that we have to approach, because it's affecting absolutely everybody, and we've got to do, we certainly got to look at it and get it sorted out quite soon. So flexibility is what helps us as workplace trainers. Flexibility with the venue, with our students, with the owners. We can let our students have a break if they want. We have one employer who is very, very quiet during the winter. So I try and get his students to go over to Italy for a couple of months, where we have somebody where they can work there for a couple of months, come back at the end of winter, and off they go again. So flexibility is absolutely enormous for us. So it's helped us not only in increasing our numbers of students, which are constantly on the rise, but it's helped us alter our procedures very quickly. We're not held back by a huge organization which has a hierarchy, which has procedures in place that take time to get through. Being a small family business, we can quite simply make a decision on the go, and it's effective immediately, and that is effective. This will be affected obviously by using online training, because it may result in us, instead of going out and visiting each student every month, we might be able to do it alternate months, and then alternate months we might be able to do something online. We'll just have to see how this flows. However, the increase of numbers shows that students and employers find this method of training very effective, and obviously very cost efficient for them as well. But without a doubt, it has helped us. I think the one person it's helped the most is me. My computer skills have gone up 100% in the last few weeks. I was tearing my hair out, it's all gone for the first couple of weeks, but now we're back in action again. So I think we've all benefited. We've all learned from this experience. As I say, even those of us, our computer skills have improved, and that's got to be a good thing. And I think we will need to be using, electronic devices much more for our training in the future.
Thank you, Keith. That's terrific.
You're welcome.
Yep. Any other points? You're happy, right? You made all your. Okay.
Yep.
Well, we're very privileged now to hand the stage over to Stephen. Stephen from Tasmania. Part-time fireman, I hear, but
it went off again.
Stephen has an incredibly important role to play as a member of the IRC. As you know, we all look at the IRC's decisions about the impact of the curriculum itself and the content and why and all the investigation that they've done. But I'd like to, hand it over to Stephen to tell us maybe a little bit about the IRC process, maybe a little bit about how he may see this affect curriculum reviews. Now, before we start, I'll just tell you a very funny story. I go back to teaching back to 1971, actually. And I heard my first sentence, I think within about 3 days of being in the corridors of William Agnes, that cookery curriculum was under review. I don't think they've ever stopped that review yet. It's been an annual event. In fact, I think it's almost been a biannual event. So, Stephen, we'll hand over to you to give us your thoughts and what do you think is going to be the effect, and is there going to be any significant changes? Are there going to be any new subjects come online, or maybe more emphasis on computer training? And how will the IRC look at the modules in terms of their delivery, given the fact that there may be more emphasis on online development? So, Stephen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, chefs. Hope we're all well. Yes, look, being on the IRC is a very interesting sort of thing to be a part of. Having my role within the ACF as the education chair, I was given that task to sit there and represent not only the ACF but our industry. So as it stands at the moment, I am the only chef that sits on that IRC. So I'm really the only one coming from where we sit and how we see things. So it's a very important sort of seat that we hold, and I certainly want to try and represent our trade to the best that I possibly can, and that's not just only in the ACF's interest, that's in our interest as a trade. So as far as sitting there in the process which goes and how it all unfolds, it's very much it's a clunky sort of thing. It has to go, if we're looking at the reviews, and we are the cookery training package, it has to go up for a review, out for consultation, back for review, consultation, etc. Now, we were just before COVID hit, we were just in the process, and we'd already sent out the consultation for stage 2, as far as what the training package and the makeup was going to look like. And we asked industry, TAFEs, everybody for feedback to come back. And as it stood, we had over 1,000 bits of feedback come in, which was great. So there's a lot of information there to work through. Now, when it came back, I took a stand that because we are represented with tourism and travel, so there was lots of stuff there, I actually asked if we could organise a specific cookery TAC, so a technical advisory committee, to solely look at our training packages, because I don't think it's fair to ask someone from travel to give us input in what our training package should look like. So that was actually approved by the chair and the rest of the IRC. So Skills IQ is in the process at the moment of actually putting that TAC together, so we can actually go through all of those comments that came through, and they were varied, and it was really good to see. You can always tell that there's a lot of passion in the room just with the comments that we read. And there's a lot of work to be involved. Now, I got asked the other day about how long is this going to take, and I don't think it's something that we want to rush. So just going back to COVID and how the pandemic, your question was how the pandemic will reshape the delivery. We have to be very, very careful on how we approach this. And, the positives, yes, we've been made aware of what is possible, how we can train. We have to think outside the square. Those short instructional videos, the Zooms, the Teams, the technology. And I'm with you, Keith. I've learned so much technology in the last 3 months. It's not funny. But we cannot get it to a place where we can't bring it back. And as Sarah said, and right, we're a practical trade. So we cannot let all of this online stuff overtake the nuts and bolts of what it is we're trying to teach and train. So that's always in the foreground of what I'm speaking when I'm at the IRC. And as of yet, we haven't had a meeting during the COVID. So it'll be interesting to see what the speak is when we actually convene again. I do know that other organisations that sit on the chair on the IRC are pushing for different mediums, and they want this to be pushed through rather quickly, where we're trying to hold it back and make sure that what we say, we get it right. Because like I said, if we don't get it right now, it's going to be very, very hard to change. So I would much rather, you know, get the appropriate people on board to represent the TAC and put it back out to industry, and that being the chefs and the RTOs, everybody involved, and actually getting constructive feedback and positive feedback that is for the better of the training package. And you know, we sit here, I'm not sure how many's in the meeting at the moment, but I'm sure if we asked if there's 30 there, I can't see, we'd get 30 different opinions on the training package. But at the same time, we all want the same outcome, and we all want our chefs or our apprentices, when they leave the training, to be trained and to be able to hold their own in industry with that qualification. So that's where we need to be very, very careful with what it is we're doing. And you know, I love the fact that there's so many people thinking outside of the square in this whole thing and how they can deliver their training. One thing that has come up is service periods. How do we finish our apprentices, our internationals? How do we get those service periods? I work for TAFE down here in Tasmania, and one of the things we've done is we've actually started doing charity, so meals for charity. So I had a group that had 12 services to go, so we ranged that whole training around different meals, different service periods, how we did it, and then all meals were donated. So we sort of thinking outside the square. Would we have done that normally? No, we'd put them through our restaurant, or they'd go out into industry, but we had to think differently in order to get these students qualified. One of the things, you know, that I also think could be a positive in this is more employer engagement. So we can now start putting the onus back on the employer to actually start being invested in their apprentices' training. And when I say that, I don't mean, and this is, you know, the minority always sort of seems to kill it for the majority. So, but if we're doing online theory work, online assessments, and I'm not talking about practical, you know, why can't we have the employer signing off, checking work before it's actually submitted? So it's getting double, before it even comes back into the TAFE, to the RTO, it's actually been discussed with the apprentice and the employer what it is they're doing. Let's not get too comfortable in this whole Zoomy technological platform that we're using. Like I say, we don't want to get it to a place where we cannot return to get back what it is we're actually trying to train. Another big thing is the cost involved. At the moment, here in Tassie, we're only allowed to have 6 students in a class. So if we've got a class of 16, we have to then run 3 separate classes in order to finish off those same students. So that's 3 extra teachers. It's, you know, the cost involved in that. So there's some sort of, you know, it's not going to reshape, but we'll get that back as quick as we can. You know, back to the IRC, it is moving. The more input and the more feedback, you know, we can get when we put these things out, the more power we have. And I've been listening to your other forums that you've had previously, and you know, we've got some real opportunity here, like has been said, for us to come together as an industry and work together and be a voice and actually have a say, and get those positive changes that we want, and actually get them implemented. Another thing I wanted to raise, as with in Sarah's area, is vet in schools. It's something that needs to be really highly embraced, promoted. I always use this as an interview for industry. So I worked in that space for a number of years, and I was basically the interviewer for those students who were going out into industry. So the employers would ring me up and say, I need this person. I would say, I'll send you this. And that was it. There was no problem. So I think we really need to embrace that area, especially now. And it's where we can have a little bit more flexibility in that learning space. Get them up to speed with online. Get them a really good basic training, and then bring them out, and they're useful. They won't be getting it won't be such a shock to them when they actually do it. And another point I want to raise, and I don't know if everybody's up with this, but we need to make sure that our apprenticeship management centres, who are they accountable to? So who's making sure that when they go out, they're checking workplaces and making sure that when an apprentice is signed up, that workplace is suitable for the apprentice and the chef has the qualifications to train that apprentice. This is where we're falling down, and this is something that needs to be done. So this is another area within the IRC that I am actually pushing as well. So I'm not sure if I've covered what you asked, George, but I sort of wrote notes.
That's terrific. A couple of points flashed through my mind. Your employer who checks the documents before the teacher gets them. What happens if the teacher then fails the documents?
That's wouldn't that be great?
I can see some issues there.
Yes.
And incidentally, we go back probably 45 years that I can think of where we've struggled with the fact that employers were never checked on who they actually take on as an apprentice. That's been a lifelong issue. It's like car parking spaces in TAFE colleges as to who gets them. So anyway, I'll throw it open now for comments from the participants. Anybody like to ask a question or make a comment? And any? Well,
sorry, I think what Steve says about the employer engagement, I think is so important. We've really got to get not only the employers but the chefs within the venues involved in the training. In workplace training, it is a requirement that the chef actually signs off on each unit. Not only does that show that the chef has been watching, but also it's a double check on the trainer that he's actually been out to collect the work and been there and visited the student as well. But that engagement with the employer is just so important. I think it's if we can get the employer and the chefs involved, the enthusiasm of the apprentices just skyrockets.
Good, thank you.
Does that mean that the chef must also have a TAE form?
No, the chef doesn't have to have a TAE, but they must have their certificate 3. But it's an interesting idea here. The head chef at the Intercontinental Hotel has suggested to me a system where all heads or execs obtain their TAE, and they actually become the trainers within the workplace that are then scrutinized by assessors that come. And for some of the larger hotel groups, it would be a good system for them to work so that, they can train within their own environment with qualified people. Yeah, an interesting way of looking at it.
Interesting, but just personally, from my point of view, is I wonder whether that would lead to people being trained for their own particular circumstances, not mobility. One of the things that we've got to be very careful of in my book is that we have to train so that people are mobile. It's great to have the notion of training for an industry, but there's a propensity that some people in industry only want the person trained for their own establishment. We have to realize that we're not training a machine, we're training a person to think. And that person who can think then can work somewhere else. And I think that's that's personally my own personal take on it.
Quite correct, quite correct.
How about you, Athol? Have you got anything to?
Yes, no, thank you very much, George.
There.
No, it's been quite relative. About 6 months ago, 9 months, October last year, and found a lot of synergies. And I know it's a tough topic to discuss, and George, you said it really well yesterday at the T-Chef meeting in the evening, where, yes, congratulations, it's a great topic and my paper of discussion, but then also too, it's been a topic that's been around for a few decades. So I know it's all about change, but it's then on multi-levels. So my journey started back in October last year, and I was working up at the Mindle Beach Casino up in Darwin, and just being in the industry and current in the industry, I thought it really hit a kin that I needed to have a voice and speak out about our culinary crisis and skills. And I've done a paper and I'd like to share it with you all. But basically a few points I'd like to share is the adapting to a shifting landscape. And basically my executive summary is just saying, and I guess while it's a hard pill to swallow, our education system has failed us over the years in terms of and has hit a crisis point where standards are no longer being attained and services are being compromised. And being an executive chef in a large brigade, there's no lack of accredited courses where our industry can be taught to a higher level. And getting that master chef or having a standard or a benchmark. And I'd really like to see our industry return to a professional term of status, and hence now with the recent discussion we've had, and George's and the team and T-Chef have brought to the table about all the amalgamation of all the associations coming together, having a united voice. I think that's critical, and there's a united voice for that. So if we can get that up and running, then I think it's time to then look at our industry as a profession, look at our training system and career pathways, because as we know, there needs to be a change as the current industry and people within the system tend to, our students seem to be more of a, sorry, I'll just find my spot here. I guess what is happening, it's obviously affecting our tourism industry, and basically that's also creating a dumbing down of our education system. And basically we have an unrecognized skills that these basic skills in higher education are underpinning our accredited courses, and there's a crucial gap in where the education training pathway has been decimated, the way a lack of pathways, post-apprentice to the trades to a master craft level. So
Athol, what I will do is, as I said, I will put that paper, your paper on a part of the resources that come with the recording. So people will be able to go through that in depth and read about it and see the points. You make some very good points in that paper, and I'll certainly make sure that that is appended on the website.
Thank you. It's not a criticism to everyone. I think it's just a common voice that we all share, and I see it as a positive. So it's by no means sorry, to everyone in the room there. I know there's a lot of cross interest and ventures, but I think it's a topic we all need to address, and I'd love to share it with you. Thanks, George.
Good.
Thanks, everyone.
Anybody else got any?
Can I jump in? I normally jump in at the end and throw a bomb in there, but I'm not going to today. Just touching on what Athol said, and also Stephen, the apprenticeship centres are federally funded, and this is when I get on every week, and not every week, but every time there's one, and I clap on about reform within the industry. These traineeships and apprenticeships that are going through that are sitting under the wrong type of establishment where they're not getting the hands-on training, again, that should come into a review with the government, because they're the ones that are funding these apprenticeship centres that aren't doing the right thing. I had an apprentice that was not achieving at TAFE and found out that he was working for his father's company in a fudge factory. He really should have been doing logistics or warehousing, because that was literally all he was doing. Yet at the end of the day, they get funded, not unlike TAFE, where it's bums on seats, and they'll sign up anybody. So that's part of the reform that I feel needs to be touched, like Athol said, where we want to build the this sort of area up to a higher standard. We need to start at the grassroots with these people that are signing these kids up into areas that are not meeting the training package, that are not meeting their apprenticeship contract, that shouldn't be signed up there in the first place.
The worst thing is that there is such a hot potato.
Very well.
Yeah.
Sorry, Stephen?
So the subject of the apprenticeship is such a hot potato. No one wants to take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
Who's taking responsibility for it?
Yeah. A couple of years ago, where TAFE had a really strong disability section, I was very much a part of that. One of our jobs was, if we had an apprentice come through with any sort of learning difficulty, my job was to go out to the employer with a teacher consultant, and we looked at where they were working. We looked at the training package. We looked at their contract. 9 times out of 10, we took the apprenticeship centre out with us, And we caught a lot of them out that weren't getting the skills that really shouldn't have been signed up in that. With the mix of everything going on now, obviously, you know, and it all comes back to government funding. They're not going to fund us to go out there and do that, but the apprenticeship centres aren't doing their job.
No,
So we were doing that with mainly focusing on the doors, because that was another federally funded thing where we could subsidise the apprentices' wages if they had any form of disability. So to cover our backs, because we were actually getting that, like applying for that through TAFE, we had to do these audits. But they're for disability apprentices. For the common apprentice, it doesn't happen. And 9 times out of 10, they could work for their family, and they're doing things that don't meet that requirement. But, you know, they get signed up and they, So I think that's
Stephen
part of the
did
reform.
make the point that was one of the things that you were looking at, weren't you? A stronger accreditation of employers.
Absolutely.
No.
Well,
okay.
we actually go out
Can
and
I raise
visit
one
all of
small
our
thing as
employers.
well? Stephen, can you look at the accreditation for vet teachers to make sure that compliances are being met by vet teachers? Because I make every effort to be compliant every single year, and I can guarantee you I'm probably 1 in 10 who do.
I hear what you're saying. I had the same thing in my workplace where I was at vet school.
That was applauding in the background.
Yeah. and the other teachers didn't have the qualification.
Yeah.
So
That's exactly what's happening out here.
Yeah.
Go and look at it.
I'll jump in there again, sorry, but we
I'm
actually
talking
had...
about TAFE, I'm talking about...
No. We had the DOEs come in and we were training them because they weren't qualified. They'd been teaching at schools for some even 8 years.
Get onto it.
Giving them the qualification, and some of them didn't even know how to peel a tomato, how to blanch or refresh a vegetable.
Yes.
I'm not kidding.
And
I was horrified.
Boning a chicken.
Yeah. Yet they come out with the same quality.
Coming in next week.
I think that, you know, it's 1 minute to go before we call it a day on this. We've explored a lot of issues. We've explored a lot of visions, and I think it's been a very good session. This, in actual fact, is the last of the 6 planned sessions that I had in mind, and I haven't received anybody else's opinion as to any other topics that really need addressing. So I'll wait for that. But although I am going to put the notion to the Technical Chef Association, or the Institute at least, that maybe we have a once every 6 month symposium where we can have it maybe for 2 or 3 hours and 2 or 3 speakers, and have a sort of an industry catch up through this medium. As
George, maybe try and get a guest speaker from the Australian Apprenticeship Centres.
So thank you very, very much, panel. If there's no other questions that are burning with anybody, I'd like to say thank you very much to Sarah, Rye, Keith and Stephen for your contribution. A lot has been said over the last 6 weeks. There have been some very good points made at everyone, and this has been no exception. The recording of this video will be online by Friday. If I ask, please, that the 4 presenters, if you can just point down your ideas as a summary. I put the summary on, and believe you me, we get more people looking at the summaries because a lot of people are busy or whatever, they like reading the summary. And we've had 459 people visit the website, and about half of those have viewed videos and about half of those have actually downloaded summaries. So that's an important issue. So may I ask that, please? In final points, in terms of visual learning, visual testing, I have rekindled an old website which I had up to about 5 years ago called OzChef. It is now becoming available, and it has 59 subjects that can be tested at the professional level, 3,500 questions and over 2,000 graphics. And you can pick a subject and you can test someone on there. And it might be worth you looking at ozchef.com and just seeing what it has to offer. It was very popular with companies who ran competitions on it. And no one will ever convince me totally that you can't do practical virtually, because having had 11 years of experience before I actually closed that site down, we ran salon culinaires across the world that actually worked. We even had winners verified who were actually working on cruise ships at the time. So, you know, there are obviously some inhibiting factors, but there are some very good factors involved in even practical aspects that can be done online. So may I say thank you very much for all the participants for your involvement. I hope that you've got out of this session as much as the others have got out of the other sessions. And being the last comment, I'll say au revoir and thank you very much.
Thank you, George.